Uganda is one of the countries in the world where non-governmental organizations, NGOs, play a major role in fostering economic, political and social development of the country. By the end of 2007, there were over 7,000 NGOs operating in Uganda. Until November 2006, regulation of non-governmental organization activities in Uganda was done under the 1989 NGO statute, which was amended in 2006 to become the NGO Act. The NGO Board, the government arm responsible for regulation of NGOs, was the only body mandated to regulate NGO activities. Ironically, despite being major stakeholders in the NGO sector, NGOs didn't and still don't have representatives on the NGO board. In the face of such government monopoly to control the activities of non-governmental organizations, the NGO fraternity received continuous criticism from different parties, including government, citing inefficiency and unethical behavior amongst NGO peers.
We have been accused for long for being very, very fragmented. So when we develop standards collectively, when we use standards collectively, it also means that we are starting to work together. Then that is a first step in having some kind of cohesion among NGOs. The process is very good in terms of helping to make those organizations that go through constantly improve their performance. What the QuAM does is that it looks through all your systems as an organization and says, yes, you are on the right track, but here you need to improve. So if you go through QuAM 1 year, you should be able to have a roadmap of how you want to improve over time. In QuAM, we also learn from the examples of different NGOs. If we go through a process, if district networks for district NGOs go through a process at the district level, because you have a QuAM council that looks at different organizations, I think that council could also be used as a space to try and help people to say, these are some of the good practices that we have had, maybe you can take them on.
The government has been complaining that some NGOs have problems with standards. They are not accountable. Some of them are, what do they call them, briefcases. Some of them deceive communities. And we are saying that if we can do our work very well, observing standards, if we can show that we are serious people the way we work, not only are we saying it is good for civil society and NGO sector, no, or in addition, we are also saying that it is a good example for the whole country. The government institutions should also observe standards, should also look at issues of integrity, issues of legitimacy. At the end of it, we are all talking about good governance, we are all talking about democracy. Good for NGOs, good for the whole country as a whole.
These conditions compelled the different stakeholders in the NGO sector to develop a self-regulatory framework that could enable them regulate themselves and realize optimal credibility. Two national NGO networks in Uganda, that is, Ugandan National NGO Forum and Development Network for Indigenous Voluntary Associations DENIVA, spearheaded the process that involved consultation with different stakeholders all over the country.
One was to establish the desirability and feasibility of this process, because many NGOs, many NGO networks had their own codes of conduct, and they were just for their members. We also studied different codes of different countries and how can we learn from their implementation. The second phase was then the drafting process. Drafting involved a series of consultative meetings. So we had a series of regional meetings, we had a series of national consultations within ourselves and with also other stakeholders. We consulted Ministry of Local Government, we consulted the NGO board itself, Ministry of Internal Affairs, we consulted the donors, we consulted the Ethics and Integrity Ministry. We also consulted the public. We published a newspaper supplement calling on the public to give their views and comments on what should be the standards that we should adhere to as NGOs.
In September 2006, a new regulatory instrument for NGOs was launched at the second edition of the Uganda Social Forum. This is what is now known as the NGO Quality Assurance Mechanism, or QuAM in short.
The QuAM is an instrument that builds on NGO codes of conduct in their diversity. Before the QuAM, indeed, NGOs had their own codes of conduct that guided their work as organizations. But the QuAM is one that is broader than that. So it builds on the rich experience that different NGO codes of conduct articulate, but brings to bear additional insight. QuAM is not a policing instrument. It is a tool that was developed for and by NGOs. It is something that emerged from the sector. So if you bring tits and bits from different codes of conduct and create a hybrid mechanism, that is what we are referring to as the QuAM.
The foundation of the quality assurance mechanism was developed on a firm set of principles intended to ensure responsible practice and protect the credibility and integrity of certified NGOs and their networks in Uganda.
While the mechanism was supposed to be voluntary in nature, was going to be administered by the NGO community itself, it had to have teeth. And therefore it had to have sanctions, and the rules could be severe, and even ending up in your expulsion from the club if you did not adhere to these rules. The second principle was that while it was a voluntary process built around assessment, so it's not simply regulation, but it is also a process that helps the NGO that wants to be certified to learn along the process. And that's why, for instance, there are different levels of quality standards. So you start at a certain level and gradually you graduate to different levels and you learn in the process. Another principle that was important is to privilege beneficiary assessments. We felt that it was important that NGOs should not simply look at each other and decide amongst themselves whether they could be certified as bona fide NGOs, but also that the process had to give a prominent place to beneficiary assessment. Now, these beneficiaries could be the population that an NGO is there to serve, or colleagues in the community, or whoever it might be. It had to be administered in such a way that it did not depend on donor funding. That's why if you look at the QuAM now, people have to pay, the candidate NGOs have to pay in order to be certified, because that's supposed to reflect the administrative costs involved in the process. And the final principle was that it should be locally driven. So we tried to avoid as much as possible a design that would depend on a national secretariat, although a secretariat does exist, but most of the work is being undertaken at the district level. So an NGO is certified mostly at the district level. That's where it is known. That's where its credibility can be best assessed.
The duty of overseeing the implementation of the QuAM is vested in a National Certification Council. The council constitutes of 7 members.
First and foremost, we look at it to be an independent council that decides on its own. 2 members of the council are independent people. We call them independent because they must not come, and it's a must, they must not come from the NGO fraternity. They are people of high integrity whom we feel should be knowing enough on the civil society work, but do not actually belong to the civil society work. There is a representative from Uganda National NGO Forum and a representative of Deneva on the council, being the promoters of this initiative. Then there is one person who is chosen by thematic NGOs. Thematic NGOs here, I mean NGOs which represent different interest groups, women interest groups, people with disabilities, religious groups. Then there are 2 people who represent district networks chosen in their home areas.
Implementation of the QuAM is based on clearly defined benchmarks that organizations commit themselves to adhere to upon certification. These are what are referred to as quality standards.
There are in total about 59 standards, and they are categorized in 3 broad areas. Standards for the NGO as an organization. There's issues about governance, there are issues about reporting. Then the other categorization is one to do with standards for further improvement. All this categorization has minimum standards and standards for improvement. So the minimum standards are those that every NGO should adhere to, should be able to meet. Now there is also, we appreciated the fact that there could be NGOs that are just starting up, and therefore they will get a provisional certificate until they are able to meet all these minimum standards for them to get the full certificate. Now the full certificate, of course, you get it, an NGO gets it after meeting all the minimum standards and the standards for improvement. The advanced certificate is one that an NGO should adhere or meet all the standards, minimum standards, standards for improvement, and standards for further improvement.
QuAM certification is not compulsory, but open to both indigenous and international NGOs operating in Uganda. Eligibility of an organization to be regulated under QuAM can only be achieved upon application and approval by the Council after assessment.
The advantage of this process is that the NGOs first assess themselves based on the standards that have been set in the certification process. And when we visit them to certify what they have actually reported, we go through a lot of processes and they present what they have. A number of cases it has been a learning process for them, and they realize quite a number of gaps that they have in their systems. Many of them at first they think they have everything, especially the long established NGOs, but the discussion is amicable and in form of building capacity, in form of internal understanding of the system. So for me that has been an experience that I think personally and the Council has benefited in understanding the certification process, but also the NGOs that have gone through it have also understood the main quality standards and actually the modes of operationalizing them.
NGO Quality Assurance Certification is not a binding legal instrument, but once issued, the provisions of a certificate are binding on the certified NGO and could attract sanctions in the case of any breach. Ugandan National NGO Forum and DENIVA were the first to apply for QuAM certification and are making continuous efforts to make their members appreciate its importance.
DENIVA has so far mobilized its membership to apply for certification, and as a network we have set the pace. We have already been certified. We have received a certificate that went through an elaborate vetting system that also included the public and our own members to give us feedback on the nature of services that we do provide to them, and also provided areas that we can improve on. Currently there is an elaborate strategy, and which is has also been termed as an outreach strategy to sensitize various members of the organization, of the network, about the importance of applying for the certificate and actually going through the certification process. We have also we are documenting feedback in terms of the quality assurance certification mechanism, and DENIVA has gone ahead to actually identify some of the gaps that there were as a result of documenting the experiences that we have had in interacting with our members in regard to the quality assurance certification mechanism.
Organizations that have undergone the QuAM certification process have had a rich learning experience.
So when we were doing the self-assessment, we thought, well, this is an NGO which has been around for the last 10, 11 years. We should be applying for the topmost certificate. And so when we did the self-assessment, we realized that much as we have been aspiring to achieve the top-level certificate, we don't qualify, in all honesty. Two of them that we were found wanting on is whether we have a strong M&E system that documents systematically, not just writing reports here and there, documents systematically what we do, how we do it, and with what impact. When the QuAM Council challenged us on this, we couldn't provide evidence. So clearly we had a major gap there, and we quickly then developed an action plan as an organization to come out clearly on this M&E system and ensure that monitoring and evaluation is part and parcel of the organizational programming. And therefore we are proud, after 1 year of going through this QuAM, we are happy to have put that system in place.
Kalangala District NGO Forum coordinates activities of civil society organizations operating in Kalangala District. It has also applied for QuAM certification. International NGOs have also recognized QuAM as a credible regulatory instrument that is worth identifying with. Plan Uganda is one of them, and they chose to vie for the advanced certificate.
The reason we got involved in the QuAM process is because we wanted to make sure that we were doing a quality job. We wanted to make sure that the systems that we have in place and the processes that we have in place are of high standards. Everything that we have in place is what was reviewed. The processes, how we do our work, the systems that we have, and we received a lot of appreciation for the quality, the high standards that we have. We have an advanced certificate of the QuAM, and I've been told that we're the only